Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the show. Obviously, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced his cabinet on Tuesday, October the 26th, and many ministers were reappointed, and some of them are newly appointed ministers. And so, joining me now is the reappointed Minister of Justice and the Attorney General of Canada, the Honorable David Lametti. David, thank you very much for making the time, Mr. Lametti. So we're going to
Great
start
to be here.
with obviously there's lots of people who are maybe familiar with some of the ministries and aren't familiar with some of the ministries, but I think one thing that's unique about your portfolio of justice is you kind of oversee one branch of government, the judicial branch of the government. So maybe speak a little bit just about, for people who aren't familiar, before we get into some of the policy talk and stuff, maybe just chat a little bit about what your role is as the justice minister and just what you're responsible for doing on top of what you're responsible for as the attorney general.
Oh, that's a very good question, and it's not one I get often, so this is great. As Minister of Justice, I have an abiding role in helping to maintain the justice system. So obviously, people know that I appoint Superior Court and Federal Court judges, and then I work with the Prime Minister to appoint Chief Justices and Associate Chief Justices. But I also work with the Chief Justice of Canada and the Canadian Judicial Council to make sure that the legal framework that administers the court is up to speed. So obviously the criminal code and criminal procedure, but also helping transferring budget asks, for example, for the administration of the federal court system to the Minister of Finance and budget processes and that sort of thing. So all of that. Remember, judges are independent. Once they get appointed, judges are independent, and they in a sense police themselves. But certainly, I have that view of helping them helping the judicial system find resources for federal courts. And then, of course, as Attorney General, I'm the government lawyer, so I participate in that system as a lawyer, or the Justice Department lawyers participate in that system as lawyers. So we have, I suppose, a role in working within that system as well.
And maybe I'll just ask you too about, as we mentioned, there were lots of ministers who were reappointed last Tuesday, you being one of them, and then there were some ministers who were newly appointed. I know we chatted a bit before how we started about how you're still in lots of briefings, even though you were one of the reappointed ministers. So maybe speak a little bit about, obviously, I'm sure you're still in briefings and there's not a whole lot of information that you have, but maybe speak a little bit about, obviously you first started out as Attorney General in 2019. So what are some of the key things that you're looking forward to as you continue to serve as the Justice Minister and Attorney General of Canada?
Well, look, obviously, I think you'll know from last Friday and events before that a number of the Indigenous justice portfolios are amongst the most pressing right now. So obviously, the work that I am doing as Minister of Justice, in complete collaboration and in many ways following the lead of Indigenous leadership across Canada with respect to unmarked graves. You know, the tragic discoveries in Kamloops and Maryvale of graves that we knew we would find them. We knew from reading the Truth and Reconciliation report that they were there. So working to move those files forward to help communities achieve justice is a main priority. Second is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. There's a 2-year timeline to co-develop again with Indigenous leadership across Canada, an action plan to implement that. And finally, as Minister of Justice, working through, again, co-developing an Indigenous justice strategy, because one of the main points of reconciliation is the revival of Indigenous justice systems, which have always been there, and really working with Indigenous communities to make sure those systems find their place in the everyday. Another grouping, I suppose, is the rights-based things that I had begun to do in the last mandate. So retabling a bill banning conversion therapy, which is simply torture, and there's no reason why it should exist. but also fighting systemic racism in the criminal justice system. I had put forth Bill C-22 to help address the systemic overrepresentation of Black and Indigenous peoples in the criminal justice system, and it was generally well received. And we're hoping, we had promised in platform to bring that back, so that's obviously a priority. And finally, I have a deadline on MAID, the next steps with respect to medical assistance in dying, and there are two committees right now: an expert committee looking at mental illness as sole criterion, and a joint parliamentary committee, which is looking at the review of MAID that we had promised when we first implemented legislation in 2016. So those are three major priorities. Obviously, other things in the criminal justice system, like a criminal convictions review board to help facilitate processes for the wrongfully convicted, creation of a law reform commission. There's a lot on my table, a lot on my plate. It's a big table, a lot on my plate, and I'm looking forward to getting at it.
And I'll ask you about a topic that's kind of hard for you to discuss, but you're involved with some of it. It's kind of a relationship between your ministries and the Ministry of Crown Indigenous Relations and Indigenous Services. So I'm going to ask you specifically about the appeal part. The Human Rights Tribunal ordered the federal government to pay $40,000 to every child since 2006 who was inappropriately removed from their home. The government has decided to appeal this case, and obviously, as I mentioned, a lot of it would fall under your colleagues Mark Miller and Patty Haidu's ministries. But maybe you could outline the decision of the federal government to appeal this case and just what it overly means to appeal the case and just some of the reasoning behind it.
Well, thank you for that question. It's important, and you'll know from the press conference on Friday that it's really quite topical, and obviously the issue is extremely important. Children have been hurt. They've been taken from their homes, or they've been denied services. And we have said that we've recognized that systemic racism is part of the root cause of this, and we have said we're going to compensate. So the important part of this is that Minister Haidu, Minister Miller, and myself, but under the leadership of Ministers Miller and Haidu, have taken the lead to negotiate a final comprehensive settlement, and those negotiations have actually begun already. They began today as a result of what we'd announced Friday, and we've put a significant offer on the table as a starter, and hopefully, with goodwill and with a lot of hard work, we can get to an agreement. Now, as the lawyer in that group, so as the Attorney General in that group, we also have to look at that decision and say, what's the best way that we think we can get to a settlement? So we have appealed, first of all, but we're immediately moving with the agreement of all the parties to put that appeal on ice for the time being and hopefully forever. So we will immediately apply to the court with the agreement of the parties to again put that appeal aside, to put it in to put it on hold, so that we get the space to negotiate the agreement. I think, as we pointed out on Friday, it's a complex decision. There are some ambiguities to it, and it doesn't cover all the people that deserve to be compensated. And so even with that decision, we still need to do more work, and we think it's better to have that appeal on ice, and it gives us the space to compensate everybody that needs to be compensated in a fair and comprehensive fashion, so that we can actually do this once and for all in a comprehensive way, and then move on to getting to the other really important question, which is fixing the system so it doesn't happen again, and so that we don't have these kinds of cases moving forward. And Ministers Miller and Haidu were pretty clear about that at the press conference. We all have a role to play in this, and again, we've done part of it with what was Bill C-92 two parliaments ago now, reforming the child care system, and really just recognizing that it's an inherent right of Indigenous peoples to take care of their own kids, and moving from there. But now we have to put the structure around that principled bill, and work with Indigenous leadership and work with the provinces to get that done.
And as a final question, I'm going to ask you kind of like a complex question that has many different factors to it. But just how long is there kind of a timeline on how long this could take, and just what are some of the key factors that could play into it until a final agreement can be reached, and until you know whether or not the court will look back on it, and just how long until the agreements with various parties can be made?
Well, we want to get this done by the end of the year, the end of this calendar year, and we've made it clear. You will have heard both National Chief Archibald and Cindy Blackstock say that we want to get it done and that we're working to a timeline. We want this. This can't keep going on. There are children who deserve to be compensated for what has happened to them, others around them. We need to rebuild. We need to rebuild trust, and we need to rebuild a new system that is much more Indigenous led, that will ensure that these kinds of tragedies don't keep happening.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Minister, for joining me today, and it's been great chatting with you. And yeah, thank you again.
Thank you. You've asked great questions. This is fantastic.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye.